Welcome to the second webinar in the Sifting Through the Facts webinar series brought to you by Wespath. I'm Leah Holsworth, a team member at Wespath's Benefits Plans Department. It's my pleasure to moderate this webinar on demystifying health savings accounts. Please know that we will be recording this webinar. Before I introduce the speakers, I do want to get to know you a little bit better. And also to give you a chance to utilize your the chat or the question feature that you have, so you can get to know the system a little bit more. Because we have a large group today, everybody will be on mute. And if you do have a question, we just want you to go ahead and use this question feature. So on your screen, usually in the upper right-hand corner, there is a chat function, or a question function. And if you can go ahead and let us know where you're located, that would be great. So if you're in Illinois, just Illinois, tell us that you're in Illinois, or we have any place exotic to make us more exciting than us here in Illinois, that would be great. So far, we have people from Missouri, Northern Alabama, Virginia, Kansas, Tennessee, North Dakota, Washington, South Carolina, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, Arkansas, Iowa, some more from Texas, and New York, Idaho, Georgia, Massachusetts. So we are covering the United States, and that is super exciting. So if you want to keep adding that in, but it looks like you all are learning how to use that question function really well. So if you would want to, the next question I have for you is, we would love to know your role in ministry. So if you are in children's ministry, an elder, in the music ministry, or work at an agency, or lay, please let us know, because we'd love to know who we were talking to. So we have some people from communications, conference staff, a treasurer, senior ministries, elders, full-time pastors, some lay, district superintendents, some deacons. I think we're covering a lot of different areas within the United Methodist Church, which is exciting. Great. All right. Oh, I love this one. We have a pastor's wife who does everything. We do know that's true. So thank you so much. Keep putting those in there. And then just so that we make sure that we have plenty of time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers to you today. First of all, we have Kelly Wittick. She's the Director of Health and Wellbeing at the Benefits Plans Department here at Wespath. She's worked at Wespath for 11 years in various roles overseeing health benefits and well-being programs. She holds a bachelor's degree in English from Illinois Wesleyan University, a master's in physical therapy from Boston University, and a master's in public health from the University of Illinois at Chicago. In her free time, she enjoys volunteering and spending time with her two crazy little kids. And my other speaker today is Bob Gerlach. He's the Health and Welfare Benefits Manager and has worked at Wespath for over 19 years in various roles throughout the organization. He holds a bachelor's degree in English and writing from the University of Illinois at Chicago. And being a good dad, he's learning to play hockey to keep up with his 7-year-old daughter. Kelly and Bob, all yours.
Thanks, Leah. Well, we are excited to be here today. This is Kelly Wittick. And I'm going to kick us off and then transition it over to Bob at some time in the conversation. What we're looking to share with you today is some information about all of the different types of health accounts and their benefits, but really focusing specifically on the benefits of health savings accounts, or HSAs, which is, the demystifying part of the title of this webinar. And we'll talk a little bit about when to consider other types of accounts instead of an HSA, but really focusing on the health savings accounts. And we do have some real life interactive examples based on Wespath's Health Flex plan. I know not all of you are in our Health Flex plan or our Health Flex exchange plans, but I think that I'm hopeful that you'll find our examples are still relevant and you can still get something out of them. So just as a brief overview of health accounts, really the health accounts are something that Wespath really encourages our health plan participants to participate in. And the reason that we encourage that is it really allows you to pay less in taxes when paying for qualified healthcare expenses. And most people have some health expenses during the year. And so if you can pay for those health expenses with pre-tax money or money that you don't pay taxes on, it ends up being a win-win in terms of both paying less taxes and having money available to pay those health expenses. So it's just a wise approach to handling your healthcare needs, and so something that we really try to encourage. For some health accounts, like health savings accounts, it allows you to accumulate savings for future expenses. And this could be a future expense like in a couple of years, I know I'm going to need my knee replaced, and so I'm trying to save some money so when that happens, I don't have to put aside so much that year. It could also be someday, something might happen, or I know that I'm going to need money in retirement to pay for healthcare costs, because that's when most of us spend the most money on healthcare is after 65 or after whatever age we're all fortunate enough to be able to retire. So the savings can be immediate savings or short-term savings, and it can also be long-term savings with some of these accounts. And then with the health savings account, you also have the bonus of potentially getting growth in your savings on a tax-free basis. So that's a pretty great thing. This next slide shares a little bit about the different types of health accounts. And I'm actually going to start all the way on the right in the purple column with the FSA or flexible spending account. So many of you, if you don't have access to an HSA or you haven't tried an HSA in the past, maybe you've dabbled with a flexible spending account. A healthcare flexible spending account, sometimes they allow you to roll over up to $500 to the next plan year. If you're in the Health Flex plan, that is something that Wespath allows. That's an IRS allowance that the employer can choose to offer that or not. But beyond that $500 rollover, it's forfeited at the end of the year. So you may have heard the term use it or lose it for flexible spending accounts. And that's because other than that small amount of rollover, you can't keep it carrying it with you. It doesn't allow you to earn interest or dividends on your funds. So it's whatever you put in, it's just static, staying there, not earning anything. And the IRS limits for 2019 on flexible spending accounts, the maximum was $2,700. It can be used for tax dependents, even if they're not on the plan. So that's kind of how a flexible spending account works. A health reimbursement account is another health account that you may have heard something about. I'm moving to the middle column, the blue column. It allows you to keep rolling over money as much as you want, but it usually has some limited portability because it is employer money. So your employer or your health plan puts money in your HRA. It's not really your money unless you spend it. So if you were to leave your health plan or leave your job, you may not be able to take it with you. And for Health Flex HRAs, so those are the Wespath plan HRAs, if you leave Health Flex or waive Health Flex, you only have 90 days to spend your HRA. Unless you retire from the United Methodist Church, then you get to keep it. But there's no opportunity to grow the funds again there, and usually you can only use it for people who are actually covered in the health plan. The HSA, the health savings account, has some additional opportunities that we think make it a little bit more special and potentially more useful than some of the other accounts. The rollover, there's no limit, so that's similar to an HRA, but from a portability standpoint, it is truly your money. It's a real bank account that a real bank owns and opens for you. And if you leave your health plan, if you leave your employer, honestly, even if you pass away, that money remains yours or your beneficiaries of the account. So it's truly a portable account. From a growth standpoint, it allows you to earn interest or dividends. And so you can have this money sitting here, and if you are saving it for the future, you don't have to worry that, hey, I chose to put it in this account and now nothing's happening with it. You can still potentially get growth there. It also has much more generous contribution limits than some of the others, specifically the flexible spending account. So if you cover a family or even just two people in a HSA plan, a qualified HSA plan, you can contribute up to $7,000 to the HSA if you're under 55, and if you're over 55, up to $8,000. And that's in 2019. The numbers went up just a little bit for 2020. So anyway, the HSA has, you know, this portability and the opportunity for growth, and it has these much higher limits. Now, one thing that I don't have on the slide that I wanted to share, based on a question we got early on in before we even started the presentation, is about what you can use these accounts for. And typically, you can use all of these accounts for what the IRS calls 213D expenses. These are expenses, again, dictated by the IRS. So unfortunately, you know, your employer or HealthFlex and Wespath don't have any ability to add things to the list that we think might be a good idea. But the IRS dictates this list of what is available to be reimbursed from these accounts. That said, it is a very, very comprehensive list of a lot of different things: medical, pharmacy, dental, vision, and even some others for health account or health savings accounts. So overall, these are pretty great accounts that allow you to save money on a lot of different expenses. I do want to talk a little bit about tax advantages and how these different accounts compare. So in addition to our 3 columns that we had on the prior slide, we've also added a UMPIP column. And so UMPIP is the United Methodist Personal Investment Plan. And so that's your 403B or retirement plan that you personally may contribute to. I hope that you personally contribute to it. And you can see that these different accounts have different types of tax advantages. Many accounts, 3 of the 4, in fact, allow you as a participant to make pre-tax contributions to the accounts. That means you can have money withheld from your paycheck to put in these different accounts, and then you don't pay tax on that money, federal income tax on that money. So that's true for all of these types of accounts except for the HRA, and that's because the health reimbursement account, or HRA, is employer money only. So you don't make participant contributions at all, and therefore they're not pre-tax. All of these, most of these also allow pre-tax employer contributions. We have an NA for the flexible spending account because the HealthFlex flexible spending account is personal contributions only. It is possible in some flexible spending accounts that an employer may make contributions to those. That's just not how the Wespath one works. But again, these are employer contributions where your employer or your plan can give you money that's not subject to federal income tax. And so again, multiple of these accounts have those same benefits. The next one is that growth item. And you can see that the UMPIP, or your 403B retirement plan, yes, that is something that you can have growth that are gains that are not subject to interest, dividend, or capital gains taxes. And from the health account standpoint, only the health savings account has that ability to have tax-free growth. So you can continue to earn dividends or interest and not pay taxes on that growth. And then the last one is tax-free distributions. So when you use your health accounts for any qualified expenses, you don't pay taxes on those. Now, flexible spending and health reimbursement accounts, you can only use them for qualified expenses, those 213D expenses that we mentioned. A health savings account is technically your money. So as an actively working individual, you can withdraw money from your HSA that is not for a qualifying expense. Unfortunately, you would then pay both tax and a penalty on that if you withdraw it before retirement age. If you withdraw it after retirement age, you would just pay tax on it and no penalty. But in retirement, if you continue to use it for qualifying expenses like those 213D expenses, then you can take it out without paying taxes on it. And most people will have plenty of health expenses in retirement to be able to take advantage of those. So it's got a really nice additional benefit that, that all of the other health accounts don't have. So let's talk a little bit more about how that tax savings works. I want to make sure that everyone understands where that tax savings comes from. So let's say that you know that no matter what, whether you contribute to a health account or not, you will have $2,500 in out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. So between co-payments, medications, co-insurance for a hospitalization or surgery or x-rays, you're going to have $2,500 in out-of-pocket expenses in a given year. If you don't make a health account contribution, you're still going to have that $2,500 bill or collection of bills. And the money that you use to pay that bill, you'll have paid tax on that, income tax on it. So you pay tax on that $2,500 because you didn't put it in a health account. On the other hand, if you contribute that $2,500 to a health savings account or a flexible spending account, you can pay that bill or collection of bills out of those accounts. And that $2,500 then is money that you have not paid tax on. So if we think about the denominational average compensation and your tax bracket is 22%, that means you're potentially taking home over $500 more because you saved money on taxes. So that's how the tax savings works when we talk about saving money. And that HSA with that triple tax advantage means that you're saving money on those pre-tax contributions, which decreases your overall taxable income. But then, like we shared a couple of slides ago, you're also not paying tax on the earnings. And if you continue to use it for qualified expenses, you can spend everything you put in plus all of the earnings, if you earn anything, without paying taxes on them, as long as you use them for qualified healthcare expenses. So that's a pretty neat combination of advantages, and they call it the triple tax advantage. There are some other advantages of health savings accounts that are important to share. And one I already referenced, which is that it has a higher contribution limit than a flexible spending account in particular. And while health reimbursement accounts don't specifically have limits, oftentimes your employer only contributes a certain amount to it. So really the health savings account allows you to contribute and set aside a lot more typically than those other accounts. So I shared the 2019 limits in a previous table, but these are the 2020 limits for health savings accounts. And if you are just covering yourself in a health savings account plan, you can contribute a total of $35.50. Or if you're and this is if you're under 55, and if you're covering even one family member in your health savings account plan, you can contribute up to $7,100 in 2020. And then if you are over 55, you get to add another $1,000 onto that. And it's important to remember that those limits encompass all contributions to your health savings account. So that means your personal contributions, anything that your employer might be contributing, and that includes money that's included with the plan. For Health Flex Exchange participants, that also includes excess premium credit. Another benefit of health savings accounts is that there's flexible timing on contributions. So you may be familiar with, in the flexible spending account, you have to decide how much you're going to set aside for the whole year during the plan's open enrollment or annual election period. But a health savings account, you could say, hey, I'm going to put $2,000 in my health savings account for 2020. And then all of a sudden in February, you end up needing that knee surgery earlier than you anticipated, or you're surprised with some other emergency room bill or injury. You can actually add money after receiving the service or upon realizing that you're going to need to receive the service. You could increase your health savings account contribution, and then you can use that money back to the start date of your health savings account. So if I open a health savings account on January 1st, 2020, and I am only planning on putting $2,000 in there for the year, and I suddenly have a $3,000 bill that I need to pay in March, in April, I can increase my contributions, and I can pay that bill using HSA money, even though I didn't add that money until after I actually received the bill. So that's a pretty cool advantage, a pretty nice thing to be able to do. Remember, we said it was portable, and that means that you can pay for expenses even if you're not in an HSA plan anymore. So if you start out in an HSA plan, you contribute a certain amount, and then you decide, that's not for me, or I'm going to try something else, or I'm now covered under, my spouse's insurance. You can still use that HSA to pay for expenses, even though you're not in that plan anymore. That's still your money to spend, and as long as you use it for those 213D expenses, you're able to use that without paying taxes on it. And then this is the last one when I referenced with the 213D expenses that HSAs have some other advantages. One of them is that you are able to use them to pay continuation or COBRA premiums. And you typically can't use other types of health accounts for that. So that's another nice benefit. So, we like to say whenever you can add more to an HSA, whether it's because you needed more money mid-year or you had an unexpected expense, you can also add more money if you had a salary change or if you rebudget things and you decide, you do have a little bit extra that you can contribute. You can make those changes all year round. I mentioned that we would be sharing a few HealthFlux specific examples. So I do want to call out for those of you who are on this webinar who are in our HealthFlux plans that a number of the HealthFlux plans actually come with money in the account already. And if we look at the green plans over here, these are our HSA plans. You'll see that 2 of the 3 of the HealthFlux HSA plans come with HSA money that's there in January at the beginning of the, at the beginning of the plan year, January 1st, you have access to this money in your HSA. So that's a really important thing to remember and to factor in when you're looking at your overall health expenses. And for those of you not in a HealthFlux plan, that's fine. Just make sure you check what contributions you may have to your health account at the beginning of the year and make sure that you're aware of those when you're choosing your plans, because that funding can really add a lot of value to the overall health plan. HSA plans, if for those of you who may not have enrolled in one in the past but are considering it for this upcoming year, they really are growing in popularity nationwide, like outside of the United Methodist Church, but also within the United Methodist Church. We're really seeing a lot more interest in HSA plans. And I wanted to share that in HealthFlux, in 2016, when we first introduced HSA plans, only 10% of our population chose to enroll in them. And in 2019, that more than tripled, and we had over 30% who actually selected, of HealthFlux Exchange participants who selected HSA plans. And many other annual conferences and employers offer HSA plans, and they really allow you to potentially avoid buying more insurance than you need. We all have the potential to overinsure ourselves if we are trying to avoid risk, and so HSA plans can potentially help you avoid buying more than you need. It also gives you more control over how you spend your healthcare dollars, because that money is in an account and you can decide how you want to use it, whether you want to use it immediately for out-of-pocket expenses or whether you want to save it for the future. And as we shared before, it does allow you to save money on taxes today, on expenses, and also prepare for future needs. So before we transition kind of into the next section, I just want to recap and remind you why you might consider choosing a health savings account plan if it's available to you during your annual election or open enrollment period. And the first is that you often have lower monthly premiums in HSA plans because the deductibles are higher and that you have to have that deductible met for a number of expenses. You really may end up paying less month to month, and that's an important thing to factor in. There are a number of tax advantages, which we've discussed, the triple tax advantage, in fact. It allows you to carry over money that you've saved into retirement to be able to use it for health expenses in retirement. And overall, it just helps you potentially be a smarter consumer when using services. You're more aware of how much things cost, and it may make you think twice, ask your doctor for a generic or other smart consumer behaviors to save yourself money overall. All right, well, I'm going to turn this over to Bob Gerlach for a little bit, and he is going to share a little bit with you about what you do with an HSA plan once you hopefully choose to enroll in one.
Thanks, Kelly. Since at this point, Kelly's either convinced you to enroll in an HSA or better utilize your existing HSA, let's look at some ways that you can make the most out of your HSA. The first, as with any money saving venture or contribution plan for contributing and saving to your HSA. Ideally, you would always contribute at least what you're planning to need for the current year, because if you know you're going to have $1,500 in expenses, might as well put it away and at least save tax dollars on that. But additionally, you should plan to start putting money aside to have a rollover goal, because even if you have a very, very healthy year, eventually you will have an unhealthy year, or eventually you will need to pay for Medicare premiums in retirement. So the more money you can save now and get those tax savings, the better off you'll be in the future. And the other thing you can do is leverage premium savings to help fund your HSA. HSA plans are generally, if not always, less expensive per month in premiums than a traditional PPO. So if you save those premium savings, your out-of-pocket costs on premiums are the same, but you could help build that HSA balance, and we have some examples to show you on that later in the presentation. You can also look for opportunities to save on healthcare costs. One way is to utilize generic drugs. These have the same efficacy as brand name drugs, but usually are at a much, much lower cost. Another option is to shop around for services. X-rays and lab services can, as two examples, can vary greatly in cost depending on where you receive those services. And the less you pay for those services means the more you're able to save. You can also speak to your doctor or provider about pay in full discounts. Most are happy to get that money up front or very quickly versus a payment plan. But on the flip side, Kelly mentioned that once your HSA is established, if you have some unexpected expenses, you can use your HSA almost as a pass-through account for tax savings, where you up your contribution or put in a lump sum contribution so that you can pay and receive those tax savings. And most doctors or providers are more than willing to put you on a payment plan with no additional fees because they're happy that the money is going to be coming to them. So if you have a $500 bill and there's 5 months left in the year, and you ask them if you could pay $100 a month because you need to wait for your HSA to be funded, most, if not all, are willing to do that because they know the money is coming. As Kelly mentioned, and as you can see from this chart, we do have growth in participants in the HSA and, most importantly, funding the HSAs. So you will be in good company if you use your HSA both for offsetting current or expected costs and saving for the future. And this really checks that first box of making the most of your HSA. You talk about putting money aside for current year expenses and also future needs. I'm going to talk a little bit about investing your HSA dollars. There's really three main considerations that you need to be aware of when you talk about investing the HSA dollars. The first is the status quo. That's where you maintain your HSA funds in a default interest-bearing account, and that account is where they have to be available for you to be reimbursed. The money is there, or you move it there to that interest-bearing account in order to pay a provider or reimburse yourself. The next step is investing for the future. Here's where you would invest your HSA funds in longer-term vehicles for medical needs and retirement. So more interest-bearing, or not interest-bearing accounts, but more investments where you will see gains and dividends, ideally in the future. And then the third option is contribute more. So increase your contributions to the maximum you're comfortable with and available to contribute for those greater tax savings in the current year and having more opportunities both to save and invest going forward. And really, if you have expenses that you need, those are where we'd say, of course, consider the status quo. You're expecting to spend that money in the current year. But if you also want to invest for the future, that's where we'd ask you to look at number 3, to contribute more. As I said, the more you contribute, the more you're able to invest for future needs. There are some cautions or considerations with HSAs. Generally speaking, the deductible applies to all services in HSA plans, including pharmacy costs. However, preventive drugs will be accepted in 2020 for HealthFlex specifically, and that means that for certain classes of drugs, HealthFlex covers their portion without you needing to meet the deductible. If more than one person is covered in the plan, the full family deductible does always apply. That's a little different from a traditional PPO where each individual has their own deductible. And then you're also not able to contribute to an HSA if you or your spouse has other coverage that pays toward or pays before the deductible. So this would be Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, even a full use FSA that a spouse may have on another plan. But despite those considerations, HSAs can be and are a great vehicle for savings. You pay no taxes on what you contribute in that year of contribution. Going back to the example that Kelly brought up about needing to put some money, extra money in your HSA because you've had some unexpected services, it would apply to those savings as well. Even if you put a lump sum, instead of doing payroll deductions, put a lump sum into your HSA, you can still claim that on your taxes by the next April 15th to ensure you get those tax savings. Again, another vehicle to save for retirement, both for healthcare and, as Kelly mentioned, general expenses. And then you always have access to that accumulated balance for health expenses. And as long as you use the money on those expenses, the payments are tax-free. One of the more difficult things to decide is really how much you should plan to contribute. If you're in HealthFlex, one of the things we have in place to help estimate out-of-pocket expenses is Alex Benefits Counselor, which is an online decision support tool. Alex will not only recommend how much you should put aside, but they've done that because they've estimated costs, or Alex has estimated costs based upon what you say that you and or your family will utilize in the upcoming plan year. You can talk to EY financial planners who are familiar with our HSA and the investment options and can help you balance how you should be contributing to your HSA as it relates to your overall portfolio, including UMTIP or any other retirement vehicles you have outside of the United Methodist Church. And again, we've said this a few times, this is pretty critical. If you have known expenses, you should definitely plan to save enough to cover 100% of those known expenses. Because if you don't, you're going to pay taxes on those. Plus any additional savings for emergencies. You know, I have a 7-year-old who plays hockey, so there's always a chance that she could end up at urgent care, hopefully not the ER, but there is that possibility. And then, or saving for planned future needs. Again, my daughter's 7, she will need braces in the coming years, so this is a good way to save for that big bill before I have it. And then in addition, healthcare expenses in retirement. As we get older, we tend to not get healthier. We tend to need more healthcare. Kelly mentioned earlier the different types of accounts, and we have the 2 types of health accounts that you can save money in your personal contributions. And those are the health savings account or the flexible spending account. So how would you decide which one to use if you're in an HSA plan? Generally speaking, the greatest tax savings and the lowest risk is to contribute to the HSA first and contribute to that to the max before you contribute to an FSA. And that's because the HSA money is yours forever. The FSA, you would lose all but $500 and you could lose even more of that if you end up leaving HealthFlex or leaving your employer during the course of the year. A couple scenarios where you may want to consider or may want to contribute to an FSA in addition to a health savings account. Obviously, if you're maximizing your HSA and you know you have known expenses, like dental and vision expenses, that you can use an FSA for while leaving your HSA money in place. And then the other is if you expect your medical, pharmacy, and behavioral health expenses to exceed the IRS required deductible. That's $1,400 for an individual or $2,800 for a family for 2020. What that means is that the IRS will not let you use FSA dollars to pay for medical, pharmacy, or behavioral health until you hit these limits. Once you hit these limits and you've proven that you've paid this much in expenses, your flexible spending account can go from limited use, meaning that it can only be used for dental and vision, to a full use FSA, and then can be used for medical, pharmacy, and behavioral health. Again, there's not as many benefits in doing that if you haven't already maxed out your HSA, because you still have a risk of losing anything over $500 that wouldn't roll over, whereas the HSA is yours forever. Now we're going to walk through a couple examples. We've got a low utilization scenario that I'm going to walk through, and then Kelly's going to go over a high utilization scenario and show some examples of how a few plans look when stacked up against each other for services. So in my low utilization example, we have a participant, John, who covers his wife and 7-year-old daughter in an HSA plan. They do not have many regular expenses. Previously, John contributed to a traditional PPO plan and put money into an FSA to help offset those out-of-pocket costs. As we spoke about maximizing the HSA earlier, when John moved to a lower cost HSA plan, he diverted that money that he was saving in premiums each month to the HSA, and then took the amount that he was contributing to the FSA and started contributing that to the HSA. So that meant that he essentially kept his out-of-pocket expenses exactly the same from month to month, just shifted from paying more in premium to paying more in services when services were utilized. And John's goals were initially to have enough money to cover expected services and then begin saving money in that HSA for future expenses. So when we look at John's experience before and after the HSA, before he was in that PPO plan with an FSA, and after he's in an HSA plan with a health savings account. In the PPO plan, because of co-pays and a lower deductible, he had $1,000 in out-of-pocket expenses in a standard year. And then in that first year in the HSA, that went up to $1,500 in out-of-pocket expenses, again, due to that higher deductible and no co-pays for office visits. In the PPO plan, he put all $1,000 into the FSA, and that covered the cost. But based upon the savings of premium and diverting that $1,000, he contributed, he ended up with $2,000 in premium savings and contributed that $1,000 to the HSA instead of the FSA. So the total pre-tax contributions on the PPO plan was the $1,000 to the FSA. And then the total contribution to the HSA was $3,000, $2,000 in just premium savings alone, and then the $1,000 that matched what had been put in the FSA in the prior year. So the total savings for the future shake out to be $0 in the PPO plan because everything that was put in the FSA was spent. And in the HSA, there's $2,500 in future savings. We get there because we had the $2,000 in premium savings, the $1,000 in HSA savings, and that HSA plan also came with a $1,000 built-in contribution. So that's where we get the $4,000, back out the $1,500 in out-of-pocket expenses, and you're left with $2,500 in future savings.
All right, well, if it's okay, then I'd like to share a high utilization scenario, because there's definitely a perception that people who have a lot of healthcare needs shouldn't be in HSA plans because of this perception that they're high deductible plans. You know, they have more out-of-pocket expenses, and so there's a sense that, yeah, if you're healthy, it's a great idea, but not if you have real needs. And we just wanted to share an example that shows how that's not necessarily the case. So here's Jane. She is going to cover her husband and 2 young kids in her HSA plan. And while Jane and the kids have few regular expenses, her husband actually has a lot of expenses. He sees 2 specialists regularly. He's had multiple hospitalizations. And in fact, when they were in the PPO plan before, her husband often had enough expenses that he would hit his individual out-of-pocket maximum. And in this example, the PPO plan, and this is exactly what it would be for the HealthFlex PPO plan, that out-of-pocket maximum for one person is $5,000 a year. So Jane has been contributing the maximum to the FSA each year, the $2,700 in 2019. But with an out-of-pocket maximum of $5,000 for her husband, she often is running out of pre-tax money to pay the family's medical expenses. And so her goals are, she's hoping to save enough in either the HSA or a combination of the HSA and FSA that she could actually roll over money each year and potentially pay all of their expenses pre-tax, and hopefully build a safety net for unplanned future expenses or even retiree medical needs. So here is the before and the after for Jane. So previously in the PPO plan, her husband hit the out-of-pocket maximum in the PPO plan, and that was $5,000. And with choosing the HSA plan, her out-of-pocket maximum is now higher. So her husband now has to have $6,500 in expenses before he hits his maximum and the plan pays the rest. So that's $1,500 more in expenses. Jane and her kids historically have only needed about $500 in out-of-pocket expenses under the PPO plan. So we boosted that up to $1,000 in the HSA plan because it has a higher deductible and there's no co-payments for office visits and medication. So how does this part compare? So in the PPO plan, she had that $2,700 that she put in her FSA. But the remaining $2,800 she had to pay with savings or a credit card or payment plans, and she was not able to claim that for tax savings. If anybody is looked, you know, other than health savings accounts and flexible spending accounts, you have to have a good percentage of your total income in health expenses to be able to claim any of them in health expenses. So that $2,800 was not high enough. She was not able to get any tax savings on that $2,800. When she went to the HSA plan, again, she saved $2,000 over the course of the year by having a lower premium plan. So she put that $2,000 right in the HSA. She also had the $1,000 that was included in the HSA. And then historically, she was paying $5,500 out of pocket. So she took $4,000 of that $5,500 and she contributed it to the HSA. And the reason she didn't do all of it is because she had that HSA limit for family coverage of $7,000. We will say that Jane is under 55. So she contributed, she still has $1,500 that she normally would have paid out of pocket. So since she wanted to roll some of the HSA money over, she decided to also contribute $1,500 to her FSA. So she's still contributing the same, or she's still having the same amount in out of pocket that she had previously, that $5,500. But now she's contributing $4,000 of it to the HSA and $1,500 of it to the FSA. Her total pre-tax contributions are $7,500, but $2,000 of that is savings that, because she has a lower premium plan. So in the end, she ends up pretty neutral to where she was under the PPO plan. The difference is that she is able to cover all of her expenses with pre-tax money, and she's able to roll over $1,000 in the HSA for future years. So she ends up putting in pretty much the same amount as she would have previously, but she ends up coming out with a tangible $1,000 in her HSA, plus some additional tax savings on that $2,800 that she previously had to pay with taxable money. So I'm hopeful that this example illustrates that HSA plans are really worth everyone to take a look at, even if you have high expenses. She didn't pay more in this plan. She paid differently, and she actually had some money left over. All right, we are going to move on to one more example from our HealthFlex Exchange offering. We want to show you an example of really how you can look at all of the aspects of how you spend money on healthcare to really make the best and wisest decisions for you. Now in HealthFlex Exchange, for those of you who aren't participating in HealthFlex Exchange, we use a premium credit, and that represents what the employer or the conference or your church pays toward the health plan premiums. If you're watching this and you're not in HealthFlex Exchange, you may not have these same plans and you may not have a premium credit, but I think you can still do a similar comparison of your choices and get a sense of how it might shake out for you. The key is it's worth taking the time to think about the total cost of the plans you can choose from, and that includes what you pay for premium, what your employer contributes, and your out-of-pocket costs, as well as what you get in a health savings account or a health reimbursement account. All right, so here we go with this example. These are all HealthFlex plans. So we're going to use this B1000, which is a PPO plan. It does not have an HSA. And we're going to use two of our HSA plans, the H1500 and the H2000. We're going to use single coverage for all of these examples. So regardless of which plan you enroll in, at the beginning of the month, you get a premium credit from your employer. And in this case, we're going to say your premium credit for single coverage is $700 a month. For choosing the H1500 and the H2000, the two HSA plans, you also are going to get some money in your HSA at the beginning of enrolling. So that just happens in month one. You get $750 in your H1500 HSA and $500 in your H2000 HSA. Now it's time to actually pay the premium for the plan. And these plans have different price tags. You can see the B1000 has the highest price tag at $850 a month. The H1500 costs $800 a month, and the H2000 costs $700 a month. So here is where you can see how often the HSA plans cost less per month. All right, you're paying that bill. That pretty much eats up your entire premium credit, regardless of the plan you enroll in. But with your H2000, your premium credit covered your whole premium, so you don't owe anything additional. In the B1000 and the H1500, you do owe some additional money, which can be taken as a pre-tax contribution to your health plan or a pre-tax premium contribution. And so now in the B1000, you have paid $150 pre-tax, and the H1500, you've paid $100 pre-tax. Now it's time for you to actually use your plan. You go to the doctor, you get your preventive checkup or your wellness exam, and thankfully in all plans that's covered at 100%, so you have a bill for nothing. Regardless of which plan you enroll in, your bill is zero, and so you have no additional money that you owe. So at the end of the month, you can see that in the B1000 you owe $150, or you've paid an additional $150. In the H1500 you've paid an additional $100, but you have $750 hanging out in an HSA. And in the H2000 you've paid nothing additional, and you have $500 hanging out in an HSA. Let's move on to month two. I'm going to take all of those numbers from the bottom and bring them right up here to the top. So we're starting just where we left off at the end of month one. We get another $700 in premium credit, and we get another bill for our premium so we can stay on coverage for the next month. We go to pay it. You've seen this before. And in the B1000, we owe another $150 to pay that difference between our premium and our premium credit. For the H1500, we owe another $100. And for the H2000, you owe nothing. But for all plans, you've used your whole premium credit. This month, instead of just a wellness bill, you're actually having a service done. Maybe you're seeing a specialist, or maybe you're seeing a primary care doctor, or maybe you're getting a prescription. So you actually have a real bill that you're paying. And this time, in the B1000, you actually owe less out of pocket because you have a co-payment for your specialist visit, and you don't have to meet your deductible before you get your medication. So in your B1000, you only owe $75. And in your 2 HSA plans, since you haven't met your deductible yet, you're going to owe $150. About $100 for that office visit, and maybe $50 for your medication. So when you go to pay these, your B1000, you don't have a health account to pay this, and so you are going to owe another $75. But your 2 HSA plans, you're actually going to pay that $150 out of your health savings account, which is going to lower your balance by $150. And at the end of the month, you can see that at the end of month 2 in the B1000, you've now accumulated $375 in out-of-pocket expenses. In the H1500, you've paid an extra $200, but you still have $600 left in your HSA. And in your H2000, you haven't paid anything extra, and you still have $350 left in your HSA. All right, I'm going to take those bottom amounts and I'm going to carry them on to month 3. So this is where we're starting. It's right where we left off at month 2. We're going to get our premium credit again, same amount for all plans. We're going to get that bill to stay on another month of coverage, and we're going to pay that bill. You can see that in the B1000, we're going to accumulate another $150 that we pay toward the premium. In the H1500, we're going to accumulate another $100 that we pay to the premium. And in the H2000, we still are not paying anything additional. This time the bill is for urgent care. And in the B1000 plan, the urgent care bill will cost you a $100 copay. If you're in an HSA plan, you probably, in this example, you still haven't met your deductible, and so you're going to pay for the full cost of the urgent care bill. And it is the full discounted cost. You still get the advantage of what the contracted rates with your provider are. So you're going to owe $200 if you're in one of the HSA plans. So you can see the out-of-pocket expense is higher, and it kind of looks like, if you're just paying attention to those black bills, it kind of looks like you're spending more in those HSA plans. But of course, you don't have a health account, you don't have an HSA in that B1000, so you're going to owe another $100. And for the H1500 and the H2000, the 2 HSA plans, you're going to use your HSA again, and you're going to take that $200 off, and now you're going to have a slightly lower HSA balance, but you're not going to add anything to your IOUs. All right, so at the end of this 3-month example, you can see that for a variety of services, the B1000, you've actually paid more because you're paying more in premium each month. And in the H1500 and H2000, you've paid less or nothing at all toward premium, and you were able to use that HSA money to offset those out-of-pocket expenses, which means that in the H1500, while you've paid an additional $300, you still have $400 in that HSA. And in the H2000, you haven't paid anything additional, and you still have $150 in that HSA. Now, of course, this doesn't account for the fact that you could be putting money in an FSA or contributing your own money to the HSA. So it's important to realize that this is just an example. For those of you who are in HealthFlex Exchange, you'll want to use Alex Benefits Counselor to help you figure out how much you might spend in a given month and how much you might want to contribute. But I hope that this has been a nice illustration of how you really need to consider all aspects of cost when deciding what the best plan for you is. So to wrap up, really the important considerations are just weigh the full value of the plan. And that means how much you pay in premium, how much your employer is contributing to your premium, how much is in the health account, in addition to what those bills and what the share of out-of-pocket expenses are. And then we just encourage you to use a health savings account as a wise consumer to save money both in the current year, and potentially into the future.
All right, so thank you, Bob and Kelly. I know there's been a lot of information that's come by, and so we also have a lot of questions that have been coming up. I'm going to filter through some of these questions because some have been using some very personal examples that maybe is better taken off online, but I will definitely share your name and concerns with Kelly and Bob, and they can address those later. But so a couple quick questions while I sort through some more questions that I've been writing down. First of all, the easy one that I get to answer is where are we located? We're in Glenview, Illinois, outside of Chicago, and that's the last question that I'm going to answer with HSA or health accounts. We had one quick question that probably is, please give a couple examples of what a preventative medication is.
Yeah, so, blood pressure medications are a good example. There's some mental health medications that are preventive medications. The good news is if you are in HealthFlex, when you go through annual election, when you get some of your annual election materials, we will share with you a link that you can use to click and see a whole list of what the preventive medications are. So you don't even have to guess. You can see if your medication is on the list when you're making your decision about 2020 elections.
Okay. Another question is, if a spouse is on Medicare, can you, if you and you're not, still contribute to an HSA?
So you can, and the key would be if there's anything if there's anything that covers you, that's where you potentially have an inability to contribute to an HSA. So if your spouse is on Medicare, you can enroll in an HSA plan and contribute to an HSA. But if your spouse is on a different type of plan and covers you on that plan, and that could potentially pay before you've met your deductible in your HSA plan, that's where you would become ineligible to contribute to an HSA. It's also true if you are in TRICARE or if you have access to your spouse's FSA, because remember, FSAs you can use for tax dependence. So that's where that becomes a little bit sketchy.
Okay. So what happens to the HSA after I die? Does it go to the estate or does it go to my heirs?
So when your HSA is established, you'll have a bunch of options for investment. The other thing you'll be able to do is name your beneficiaries. So it's going to be based upon what you choose to do there. You can name beneficiaries. Obviously, if you don't name beneficiaries, it's like any other financial account where it will go to the estate.
Awesome. All right. Let's see. Oh, here's one that I can answer. Are the slides available for download? We will be sending you a link with the recorded of the webinar so that you'll have them available for you. Are OTCs covered on an HSA?
So there's one thing to note. So over-the-counter drugs, if you just go to the store and buy them, they are not. However, there are some over-the-counter drugs that a provider can write a prescription for, and those you would be able to get reimbursed from your HSA for. You would need the prescription and the receipt. It's not something that you could use an HSA debit card at point of sale for.
Okay, and then we had a question about how is the HSA invested?
So the HSA is invested based upon each individual's choice. So there's a suite of funds that BNY Mellon has available, and you can choose to invest in those. They do have some target date funds, but it is not Wespath funds today. It is through BNY Mellon.
So tell us a little bit more about the extra $1,000 limit to those single over 55, or is it $500 like for the spouse?
It's a flat $1,000. It's kind of like the catch-up contributions that they have on pension plans or retirement plans. If you're 55 or over, you can add an extra $1,000, and that's an extra $1,000 if you're single, or an extra $1,000 if you have a family. But it doesn't change based upon who's covered.
And your spouse, it doesn't matter if your spouse is over 55. It's whether you as the primary is over 55, whether you get the $1,000.
Okay, great. So then we're just going to kind of go back to the other flip side of the generation. If you have somebody who is in college or is like 20 years old, tell us a little bit more about him, how does that work? Is it going to have to go with an FSA first before it goes to an HSA? Is an HSA available for that age group?
So if back on, and I know that we don't, and actually I will go back and, sorry, thank you. I will go back and share, sorry for that. Oh, he knows what slide it is, fancy, fancy. All right, so you can see that for HSAs, you can only use it for tax dependents under 19. So it is more restrictive. If you have a college student, your HSA account is more restrictive than the FSA. So in that regard, you may not be able to use HSA funds for a college student. A challenge would be that you want to consider when you're making your choices is that if you personally are contributing to an FSA and an HSA, your FSA is still limited use, even if you couldn't use it for your college age dependents. So you would still have to exceed that minimum IRS deductible, which was the $1,400 and the $2,800, in order to convert your FSA to a full use FSA and be able to use that for your college students' medical expenses. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. Well, let me find a couple more questions here. Okay, that one we answered. I'm trying, they're coming across and some have very similar kind of buckets, so I think we've kind of answered some of these. I guess one of the other questions we had was how is an HSA pre-funded?
So the only pre-funding that happens with the HSA is the amounts that's included in the health plan, and that's very specific to HealthFlex. So it's, and Bob is going to advance to the right slide for me, but hold on, now you can. Okay, so in the HealthFlex account, these amounts, the $750 and the H1500, which of course you saw in our example, and the $500 for one person in H2000, this money is available at the start of the year on January 1st if you go through open enrollment, or if you start in the middle of the year, it would be available as of your start date. All of your personal contributions and excess premium credit, that is funded monthly as you contribute it. So that in the HealthFlex world becomes available on the 5th of each month, and that is available prorated monthly based on how much you contribute. But this plan included amount is included at the beginning of the year. And for those of you who are not in HealthFlex plans, you would want to check with your health plan or employer to determine whether you have money that's available at the beginning of the year.
So switching gears, there's just some clarification with the IRS law. They wanted to know, is it a 213B as in boy or D as in dog?
I believe it's D as in dog.
Okay. So we have a question about the difference between an HSA and a HFSA.
So HFSA isn't an acronym that HealthFlex and Wespath use, but I believe that an HFSA would be a health FSA or a health flexible spending account. They also have dependent care flexible spending accounts. In fact, at Wespath and HealthFlex, we offer a dependent care flexible spending account. So in this particular presentations, we only talked about health accounts. So when we talk about FSAs in this presentation, we're talking about those health FSAs.
Okay. All right. We're a little bit over time, but we have these questions, and I have some of the names and information down for those of you who have maybe a little bit more personal question that may want to be addressed. But what I do want to do is just go ahead and first of all let you know that we are, this is the second in our series of webinars. We do have another one that will be coming up next Tuesday. It's about the fundamentals of Social Security. Thank you. And then and that will be Tuesday, the 17th of September. And then October 15th, we are going to be covering 50 ways to support your pastor's well-being. This will be a great one to invite your staff parish relations committee to as well. And then we'll be back with one that will be just very specific to HealthFlex Exchange. So for those people who are getting ready for annual enrollment, this is a perfect one to kind of go through and figuring out how, what the tips are to make the best choice for you. And then our last one will be November 5th, and it'll be about financial well-being. So this one will be all about answering those questions. Some are basic, some are as what's the difference between the stock and the bond? How do we invest here at Wespath? And some of those tools and things that maybe need to be helpful to be cleared up or clarification on, so that you can better understand your finances. So to that, I want to thank you very much for being part of our webinar, and we look forward to seeing you again. Take care.